Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online course delivered by Quaid Scotland. We are pleased to be delivering this course in partnership with ePlacement Scotland, Edinburgh Napier University, Skills Development Scotland, and Scotland IS. The course will cover different aspects of work experience programs such as student placements or internships and is aimed at employers to help them recruit, onboard, and mentor students. For information, Equate Scotland is the national expert for gender equality in science, technology, engineering, maths, and the built environment. Established in 2006, we encourage a universal approach to progressing gender equality in STEM sectors. We work with companies and organizations of all sizes across the private sector, as well as colleges, universities, public and third sector organizations. Our industry partners share our vision for a fairer, more inclusive and diverse STEM sector. Before we move on, I'd like to highlight that even though the focus of this course is on supervising and mentoring students, we will also cover other areas that are critical to enhance our understanding of the context in which the placement takes place. We will approach this topic from an equality, diversity, and inclusion perspective, and therefore will explain some of the key terminology and concepts that businesses need to be aware of. The course is split into three main areas: inclusive recruitment practices, fair work practices, and mentoring skills. In the first video, we talked about the key concepts and terminology employers needed to be aware of when offering student placements. In this video, we'll focus on inclusive recruitment practices to understand how ED&I can help you widen your talent pool and provide a positive experience to the candidates throughout the application process. So we are now going to go into more detail and look at inclusive recruitment practices. The idea of this section is to give you the tools to set the right tone for the placement. This is because the application process and interviews are likely to be the first interaction students have with the organization. As recruiters, one would want to ensure that this is a positive experience for all parties involved. So what is inclusive recruitment? It refers to the processes and practices used to attract, interview, and hire a diverse pool of talent. These measures are designed to eliminate bias from the recruitment process and ensure that the best qualified candidates get hired for positions regardless of gender, ethnicity, or any other protected characteristics. There are several benefits of inclusive recruitment. It helps you widen your talent pool so that you can have a diverse pool of candidates to choose from. This ensures that you don't miss out on talent and can get the most out of the placement as an employer. It also exemplifies the organization's commitment to diversity and inclusion. In fact, it sends a positive message to the candidates and showcases the organization's commitment to creating an environment that will help them to learn and succeed. It also sets a positive tone from the start. So we are now going to look at three main steps in the recruitment process that you'll be involved in when recruiting students. The first would be writing an inclusive and attractive job description. The second would be knowing what the best practices are when shortlisting candidates. And the third would be assessing candidates fairly during the interviews. Recruitment starts with the defining of the scope of the role and writing the job description. This is really important because we know that the wording and content of your job description can influence the number of applications and the diversity of the profiles you'll be receiving. It can put off some candidates from applying, and therefore it is a critical step in the recruitment process. There are a few things one can ensure that the job description is inclusive and attractive to a wide range of candidates. The first would be considering who the advert is aimed at. Your target audience are students. So what does this mean when thinking about their level of experience, flexibility required around the studies, why they're doing the placement, and what do they want to get out of their placement experience? When you read the job description over, who are you picturing and what do they look like? If you don't picture a student, this may indicate that you've got some of the job description wrong. The second point would be considering how the advert comes across. So, what do you want the candidate to see when they look at your advert? How do you pitch your company? And what do students need to know to be interested in working for your company? What information do you provide? What may be missing? You could ask someone to review it, as it may not be easy for you to take a step back and see what needs adjusted. You may also want to consider the tone of your job description, whether the tone is friendly, engaging, or motivating. The third point to consider would be what the advert is talking about. So you want to provide students with the relevant information to generate interest, but you also don't want to overwhelm them. So for instance, ensure that the list of criteria is short and stick to only essential requirements. When you look at the essential criteria, ensure none of them can be learned on the job, and ask yourself if the requirements are realistic and based on your audience, students in this instance. Additionally, the language used should be clear, comprehensive, and accessible to everyone. This means avoiding the use of business or technical jargon as much as possible. The next point to consider would be to check whether the advert answers the questions the candidate might have at their end. So there are a few things you'd want to ensure appear on the job advert so that the potential candidates can assess if this is the right opportunity for them. So these would be learning outcomes, projects they'll be working on, the level and type of support available to them, if there are any opportunities beyond the placement, the working pattern, location, salary, and benefits. You also need to consider that some people may have caring responsibilities or personal circumstances you're not aware of. So provide all this information, and also ensure that information around travel requirements, flexible working options, equipment provided, etc. is also given. The last point to consider would be the removal of gendered language from the job description. Academic research by the University of Waterloo and Duke University defines a series of words that socially, culturally, and historically carry a stereotypical weight towards a particular gender. The researchers found that the language used in job recruitment materials can perpetuate gender inequality in traditionally male-dominated occupations. Commonly used words and phrases in recruitment materials can reinforce unhelpful stereotypes and exclude certain groups from applying for roles. For example, competitive, ambitious, confident, and even ninja are common words used in tech job descriptions. But research tells us that these have masculine connotations, and job descriptions loaded with masculine words can put women off from applying. Changing the words you're using can already make a big difference in how your job advert and the company will be perceived by the potential job applicants. Step two would be the shortlisting of candidates. When hiring a new person, the people in charge of recruitment may already have a type of person in mind, and this can be illustrated in the job advert and recruitment process without them even realizing. Unconscious bias can impact at every stage of recruitment, from the choice of language in job adverts to the job criteria, the shortlisting process, to eventually the interview and assessment stages. It is therefore important that recruiters take the time to reflect on the decisions to ensure they are choosing the best person for the role. This is well illustrated in this famous research from Yale, which showed that when presented with identical applications, with the only difference being one application had the name Jennifer and the other had John, all recruiters, including women recruiters, favored John's application across each criteria of competence, hireability, and mentoring. They all favored John's application over Jennifer's identical one. On a subconscious level, John was deemed a more fitting candidate based solely on his gender. This is a concrete example of the impact unconscious bias can have in recruitment, and it illustrates the importance of trying to reduce our own biases. So what can we do to ensure inclusive and fair recruitment practices are embedded within the organization? And what steps can you take to ensure you can reduce your own bias during the recruitment process? There are best practices and recommendations you can follow, and we list some examples here. So the first would be using anonymous recruitment practices. This means removing the candidate's name and any other identifiers that have the potential to cause bias from the application. These include age, address or location, years of experience, and school or university names. The idea behind this is that the recruiters can assess the candidates on what matters, which is their ability, and not metrics such as their gender, age, social background, or class. So top tip for this would be to ask one person in the organization to receive and anonymize the CV. This person should not be involved in the recruitment process beyond the stage of sharing CVs without the identifiers of the panel. You can use a Word document as an application form instead of CVs, as it'll be easier to manage and review. It's also less cumbersome for applicants and gives them a level playing field, thus preventing certain applications to stand apart from others because of those identifiers. The second to consider would be having a standardized process for recruitment. This ensures that everyone is being assessed in the same manner. So you need to have the same application forms or questions for everyone, but also have a scoring grid that is based on the criteria mentioned in the job description, and ensure that this is linked to the requirements of the job description. So top tip for this would be to base your processes and questions on the job descriptions and requirements. This will not only make things easier for you when reviewing applications, but also easier for candidates as they can best choose the most relevant experience or example if you're very clear on what is required in the response. The second tip for this would be to take notes and store them securely. This will be particularly helpful when providing feedback. Remember, you might need to show why one candidate was successful over another. The next point is about having several people involved in the selection process. This again is to reduce unconscious bias. Everyone will review applications in their own time, and when you meet and discuss and agree on which candidate is progressed to the next stage, this basically makes increases accountability and also makes the process transparent and fair. So a top tip for this would be to provide guidelines on how the panel will be reviewing the applications. If you give a rating, explain what the lowest and highest scores would mean. This would also help to have a more consistent approach to scoring and rating across the panel. The next point is about offering an interview to all participants, applicants who've met the essential criteria. Be clear upfront on how you'll be selecting these candidates with clear differences between essential and desirable criteria, ensuring that the essential criteria can be demonstrated during the application process and is based on the skills required for the job. So the first step for this, to list your criteria, you should be asking yourself the following would you hire someone without a specific skill included in the essential criteria? And can the criteria be learned through professional development? And if the answer is yes, please remove it. For example, it is unlikely that a student will have experience using software, which is mainly used in the workplace. However, they may have transferable skills to use software or the ability to learn how. Second tip on this would be whether the stated criteria is a protected characteristics. So for example, instead of writing native English speaker, you can write fluent in English. In the first instance, you're seeking a candidate from an English speaking country, while in the second instance, you're focusing on the skills required for the job, which is being able to speak in English language fluently. The last kind of point on the best practices for shortlisting is around training staff and the people involved in the recruitment process. This is to ensure they understand what unconscious bias is and the impact it can have on the organization's recruitment practices, share recruitment best practices with guidelines, and explain why the process has been designed this way. Ensure they know they'll have to take notes and will be able to provide clear and constructive feedback to applicants based on the job description requirements. A top tip for this would be to apply the same process and training to all internal stakeholders at all seniority levels. The keys consistency, and what you're doing for student placements can be used elsewhere as well. Step 3 is about interviewing candidates fairly. Interviews tell a lot to a potential hire about the culture of the organization, the working environment, and the level of support they're likely to receive. Ensure you can provide a good experience to candidates, because that is the key to recruiting the best talent. It's also setting the tone for the placement, as it is likely that this is the first time the student is interacting with the organization. And the objective here is to start on a positive note to gain trust and have sustained engagement. Small employers may choose to conduct a face-to-face interview and ask the interns to deliver a short presentation or perhaps complete a short technical test. Large organizations may apply a rigorous application process that can include 4 steps, such as a situational judgment test, a numerical problem solving test, a video interview, and finally an interview in an assessment center. What are your process? We recommend that you never recruit just on the basis of a CV or an online application. It is vital that you either meet the person in person or online, as someone who looks brilliant on paper may not be a good fit with your organizational culture, values, and ultimately the team. And vice versa, someone may not have a strong application but may stand out during an interview. Consider having, as part of the application process, an interview and a small assessment to allow for people who have the tech skills but do not necessarily have the interview skills to thrive, and vice versa. So your checklist before the interview: clear communication on the interview format, date and time, requirements, and a contact if the candidate needs to reach out or has any questions, but also to support neurodiverse candidates. Offer accessibility, accommodation, and invitation. This can be used for both online and face-to-face interviews. Give enough notice or time if a presentation or a task is required. Ensure you have checked if candidates have specific requirements so they are able to perform at optimal capacity. Some employers send the questions in advance. This can be helpful for students as they have less experience in participating in interviews. It can also help candidates with neurodiverse needs. Ask about someone's pronouns before the interview. Do not assume. Think about the time of the interview and provide alternatives if the candidates cannot attend for personal circumstances or due to caring responsibilities. Your checklist during the interview. At the beginning of the interview, ask the candidate on how to pronounce their name if you're unsure. Start by presenting the company and role to reduce anxiety and put the candidates at ease. Explain how the interview will be structured and how long it will last, and indicate when the candidate will be able to ask questions. Have a diverse panel. You can ask for support externally if needed. Ask the questions in the same order. Communicate in multiple modes. You can copy paste questions in the chat on top of asking them orally if these are being done online, or you can give physical handouts if these are being done in person. Manage expectations around when they'll hear from you, how long will the process take, and what are the next steps. Allocate time for questions for the candidate. This is also their time. Your additional checklist for online interviews: let them know not to worry about disconnection and how they can come back to the meeting if they're experiencing any connectivity issues. Explain that the panel will be taking notes and therefore they may be looking at another screen or looking at the notebook. However, will be actively listening while they are taking notes. Your checklist after the interview: store your notes safely and securely. Set a reminder to erase data when appropriate based on your organization's data storage policies. Reach out to give them the outcome of the interview in good time. Provide feedback to the unsuccessful candidates so that they can learn from their experience. Reflect on your own practices on what went well or did not go so well so that you can take these factors into account next time. It's recommended that the panel members debrief immediately after the interview process, as these reflections will be fresh and easy to refer to. This is the end of section 1, which was about different measures to consider inclusive recruitment practices within your organization. The next video covers fair work practices.